Over to you, Olivier.
Okay. Bonjour, good evening. I am really happy to start this third Covadis about today is the UN International Human Rights Day, and it's very important to celebrate. And for that, we have very nice and efficient and brilliant guests who speak about this subject. Then we have guests from several countries: US, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Germany, Italy, Brussels, and I want first to start with Veronica Mudra from Los Angeles, USA. Veronica, you are CIO and founder of White Ribbon USA. You will speak about equality gender, but not only. And for this special day of International Human Rights Day. Then bonjour Veronica, bonsoir Veronica. Then what's going on and what are you doing? Can you present your activities and the White Ribbon USA?
Absolutely. Bonjour, good morning, for somebody, good evening. I'm really happy to be here, and we should celebrate the International Human Rights Day for sure, especially it's a part of the United Nations 16 days of activism against gender-based violence towards women and girls around the world. And it happens to be so the White Ribbon Day, which is November 25, is open and is kickstarting this whole 16 days campaign around the world. So it's very symbolically that I'm honored to be an opening speaker for your event. So thank you so much for having me here with you. So I would start with giving you a little information about the White Ribbon campaign, as it's a global and the largest in the world movement of men and boys working towards eliminating of gender-based violence towards women and girls. And it was formed in 1991 in London, in Ontario, in Canada, by a group of pro-feminist men who gathered in November 1991 against the as an action after the mass gun shooting that happened in 1989 in Montreal, and when a 25 years old man slaughtered 14 women because of his hatred towards feminists. In his understanding, the feminism was something obviously evil. So as a protest, a man decided to gather and to wear a white ribbon as a symbol of support towards women. So since then, the White Ribbon campaign became global, and now it has representations in more than 60 countries. I think it's 63 for now. And I'm the founder of the White Ribbon in the US. We have an office in Los Angeles and in New York, and our offices are the youngest offices of White Ribbon in the world for now. Before that, I was the CEO of the White Ribbon in Ukraine, and I would like to say that the question of our event, what Europe can do to advance human rights in Ukraine, in Russia, in Belarus, right? So my answer that Europe can do a lot, but not much for women's rights unless the legislation is in place in our countries. So I myself, I personally immigrated from Ukraine 7 years ago. And I have an asylum in the United States under Domestic Violence Protection Program. So 7 years ago, I was not able to protect my rights and the rights of my child in Ukraine because the legislation was not in place. So the law criminalizing domestic violence was not there. And whatever you want to do, you cannot do certain steps without having a certain law that can protect your rights. And that is probably the central and the most important part to understand. The international community cannot interfere in local matters of the country unless the law is not there. So at some point, I decided to give back. Even after living in the US, I started to do white ribbon campaign in Ukraine when this subject was not a part of policy at that time. As you remember, the war was there, that just started. I mean, the war just started, so the attention was not on women's rights at all. And but we made the first uh, NGO organized public campaigns. If You Love, Don't Hate, that was 2014, and since that we've done a lot of campaigns, and we also were really honored to be in the parliament of Ukraine during the voting process for criminalization of domestic violence in 2018. And the law came into force only in 2019 in Ukraine. But I'm very happy that Ukraine is doing these steps, and it's very symbolically, for example, for me to be a speaker today at December 10, because exactly a year ago we had an event in Ukraine of white ribbons supported by the US Embassy of Ukraine and by First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska. So I saw such a huge progress done over years in Ukraine. And I can say that the efforts of civic society movements like White Ribbon, without support from governmental organizations, from non-governmental organizations, will be left without a certain voice and a certain exposure. So our approach in White Ribbon is always a collaboration. It is a collaboration between policy stakeholders, and it to have our voices heard. So I think that is very important to understand that um, that the voices of the most vulnerable categories, women and children who suffered abuse, need to be heard through such movements as White Ribbon, through other movements. But it's very important to have such days as the White Ribbon Day, as International Human Rights Day, during which we can remember and we can do something more to give more exposure to the subject. And I also want to say that, for example, in the United States, we are collaborating with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and we just recently finalized a joint campaign with them. So the white ribbon is a global symbol, and it can be really very well collaborated with so many establishments, with so many brands, with governmental organizations, with non-governmental organizations. And the most important, to be heard in the country, because I was very happy that we were heard in Ukraine. And unfortunately, we have a certain situation, for example, in Russia, when Russia became the first country in the world for now that decriminalized domestic violence. And I think that whatsoever, it should never happen in the world. And I really hope that at some point the criminalization will happen again, and the decriminalization will be overruled. So as I said, the White Ribbon Campaign is the largest in the world male initiative. So we engage a lot of men to be our ambassadors, to be our speakers. And I always are very positive that in any circumstances, in any country, you can always find people and men who are ready to listen and who are ready to take actions. So, for example, in the Parliament of Ukraine, we were supported by 200 people, and a lot of men were wearing white ribbon as their action, as the symbol of their support towards women, and as their protest against domestic violence. So I'm sure that in every country there are members of parliament who understand the importance of the subject and who are ready to take actions. And we're always there to help, and we are always there to collaborate. So once again, it's very important to remember, not just on certain day of a year, but in general, to remember that domestic violence is a huge human rights violation. But without the legislation, certain legislation, it will stay silent. So I think that is always important to work on the legislation part.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Veronica. I know your job in your work in Ukraine. I was speaker in one of your conference 2 years ago, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
When you started in Ukraine. Your personal history is really amazing because you were on the street, and you were very courageous, and you are still very courageous to and fight a lot, and that's really really nice, and we appreciate that. Then now we have to move to another very strong woman who also is fighting for freedom, and is our friend Olga, who is an activist in Belarus. Olga, are you here?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Okay, then I will give the floor to my friend Roger Casal, because Roger, you will do an interview of Olga. Roger?
Sound.
Roger, we cannot hear you.
Your sound is muted. Your microphone is muted.
Roger,
thank you very much indeed.
I give you the floor. You have to do the interview of Olga, our strong Belarusian activist.
Thank you very much indeed, Olivier, and thank you to Olga for joining us for this third edition of Quo Vadis, and to our audience on Facebook who are watching. Please remember to put your questions into the chat on Facebook. So Olga, let me go straight to the interview. This is the third time you've been with us. How have things been since we last met in the middle of November? How have things developed since then?
Yeah, it's been almost a month. There has been ups and downs, but me personally, and I think we as a nation remain very positive and determined in our struggle for freedom. Even though thousands of us continue to be persecuted and arrested every week, like, for example, my husband, who was sentenced to 14 days of prison for a walk in a city on the 29th of November. So I'm expecting him back this Sunday, and today I received a letter from him from prison. So it's been a tough time.
That's a beautiful moment to receive a letter from your husband in prison and to be seeing him back next week. Our very best wishes to him and our thanks to him and to you for the heroic work you're doing, standing up to this brutal regime. What are the conditions like in the prisons? What have you learned from your husband's experience?
Well, they are not very good. There is, of course, no such violence as it used to be in August this year, but still every Sunday, several ambulances come to this well-known or bad-known prison in Krestina Street to take some of the protesters to hospitals because they are beaten by the police, like 2-3 ambulances every Sunday there. And also, it is known that there is not enough beds in prisons, and people have to sleep in turns, one after another. There is food now there. It's bad food, but still there is food, and people, relatives are not allowed to talk or visit. But the worst thing is that most of the arrested people come out with coronavirus infection from those prisons. So After my husband is back, we will be on self-isolation for 2 weeks, I think. I hope he will not have this, but still the risk is huge.
Yeah. Well, all the very best to you and your family for the coming time. Olga, you often say to me, everybody speaks about us as the opposition, but actually we're the majority. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that? And you know, I think everybody can see that you're majority, but is there some evidence for that?
Yes, we are the majority, and there is an initiative, a web platform that calculated votes alternatively. So they assembled votes from the elections on the 9th of August, and they assembled over 1 million original votes. And their calculation showed that Tikhanovskaya got over 70% of votes, and Lukashenko, as far as I remember, not even reached 20. Yes, and there are evidences of brutal breakage of this voting process, etc., etc. But also there is an evidence who really won those elections. And for half a year, thousands of people keep struggling, keep coming out on the streets. Slowly but surely the strike grows. Every day, 2-3 people join the strike from different state factories, state plants. And if you look at the number of people being persecuted, you will understand that this is not a majority. This is a majority that is fighting against a group of heavily armed people who are at power now. I'm sure that most of the Belarusians are for the democratic changes, but of course not all of us are activists. But still, everyone tries to make a contribution to this struggle, like, I don't know, not buying food or stuff from state-owned companies, paying their bills as not on time, and all these things, like wearing some white and red things on their clothes. So I can see it everywhere, and every day there are people on the streets in small groups showing their protest. So I'm sure we are the majority.
One takeaway from this interview and from Human Rights Day, for our event today on Human Rights Day, will be that we will stop ourselves referring to you as the Belarus opposition, and from this day on just refer to you as what you are, which is the democratic majority. One other thing that we've heard about, Olga, in the last few days is the Ostrovets nuclear plant. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think you've got a relative who works there, is that right?
Pardon, the last thing
I think you have a relative who works there.
Yes, right? Yeah. Yes. I have a relative. Also, he's my good friend. He works there as a construction worker. So I don't like this idea in general when the nuclear plant is on, but construction workers keep doing something there. So this is not something secure for me. So the plant is 150 kilometers from Minsk and only 50 kilometers from Vilnius. And that's why Lithuania is so concerned. And there has been already 2 explosions there. They say it's like a test things, etc. But the last one was not long ago, like a week ago. And my relative heard this, and he was there. Although they are not allowed to bring cell phones there, so they cannot take pictures at the plant. They say again that during some hydro testing, some valves blow up, but you never know. And I think I vote for this to be stopped, because Belarus doesn't need so much electricity that this plant can produce, and for sure nobody should buy this electricity from us at the moment, at least, because all the money will go to support the dictatorship, and Belarusians will still have to pay high electricity bills. So, and every time I hear the news from this nuclear plant, I want to go to the drugstore and to buy some iodine pills, because really it's scary. Because I know also from the very beginning that even the documentation about all the instructions, how to use this or that this or that things at this plant, there was a tender after it was built. They announced a tender who will create these project papers for this factory. It's amazing. It was officially on the state's website. They announced tender to produce project papers and all these manuals for this plant. And I don't believe it's secure.
And he's also, as well as switching on the unsafe nuclear plant, he's closing the borders. Is that right?
Yes, it was announced today. It was officially because of coronavirus, but of course it has nothing to do with coronavirus, because present government doesn't give, I don't want to swear here, but they don't care about people dying from coronavirus and the infection. It's because I think, and some other people also think, a lot of people leaving the country. There are hundreds of companies, IT companies, that has relocated to Ukraine, Lithuania, and Poland. People like run away from the country. And of course, he wants to have control over his police guys who want to leave the country, for example. And there was some kind of agreement between Russia. They signed it also today about visas, etc. Maybe it has something to do with that. But obviously, it's just to control people moving around. Of course, the border, you can still fly across the border. You cannot move on a truck or train.
My last question, because we need to ask you, it's so helpful to have your first-hand experience of what's happening, and we thank you again for your courage and your bravery and everything that you are doing. This week we have a meeting of the European leaders, the European Council, the EU Council. What would be your message to them? What should Europe do?
I would expect European leaders to speak up again and emphasize that they do not acknowledge Lukashenko as a legitimate president. It's important to support this idea. It was a very good message from the International Olympic Committee to him, and he was very nervous about that. And I would expect, of course, major economic sanctions, like, for example, embargo on buying oil refinery products from Belarus, like pausing a big contract with state organizations and state-owned companies, because all this money will go to support the regime. And and again, big companies like this Norwegian company Yara, they made a statement to Belarus Kali, their partner, and also state-owned company, that they're concerned about the situation with workers, with their repressions, etc. But after this statement, there should be an action. And I don't believe that personal sanctions will really work in Belarus and will help the Belarusian people. Because if this or that politician will be not allowed to Europe or something like that, or his bills will be frozen, it will not influence a lot. But some major sanctions, economic sanctions, will leave the dictatorship without proper financial support. And also, I would like Europeans and European government to support international and implement an international investigation of crimes against Belarusian people. There was one case that is supported by Lithuania. We need international interference into this, because law does not exist right now in Belarus. And that's why we have to apply to international law.
Thank you very much indeed. We have to leave it there, but we will, for our part, certainly continue to do the best we can to make sure that your voice, the voice of the brave women and men of Belarus, of the Belarus majority continues to be heard. Thank you very much, Olga. Stay with us and we look forward to hearing you in the conversation that will follow. Olivier, back to you. Thank you.
Merci, Roger. Thank you a lot, Olga, for your speech. And you are on the ground. You are in the battle. You are on the first line, and I know what that's mean. And you are very courageous, and I am very happy that your husband will come back this weekend.
I hope he will come back, because there are cases,
Okay, but
yeah,
let's hope. And yes, I think your testimonial for today for the European for this European Council is very important also. Now I have to move, and I have to go to the core of our meeting and our third Covadis, and what's going on in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, and what we can do, the Europeans. Then now I have to move to Ekaterina. Ekaterina, you are the leader of the Association of Belarus Diaspora in Italy. And this is not the first time you are with us. This is, I think, the third time.
Absolutely, you're right.
It's good to see you back.
Thank you.
Voilà, donc after Olga, what we can say after Olga, it's very difficult. Then please, what can do Europe, Ekaterina?
Wow, it's a very good question. I would like to share my vision of what's going on in Belarus, because the Belarusian people all over the world live continuously in a connection with the home country. We are reading the news on the Telegram channels continuously, so we are always very up to date what is going on. And I should say that unfortunately we are having no more news about what's going on in Belarus, here in Italy at least. So many people could probably have an impression that the situation calmed down and recovered somehow in a natural way. I'm sorry to disappoint those who think so, but it's not over at all. The situation is getting more and more tragic as the lights fade. The regime unfolded the machine of repressions and started punishing every single person who dared to express dissent. Political activists get arrested and tortured, taken to prison and put in inhumane conditions like no shower, no hot water, homeless people and lice as cellmates. In full COVID emergency, doctors lose their job because they are not considered ideologically suitable. Students get expelled from the universities because they took part in the strike. People get arrested in their homes for having exposed white and red flags or garlands in the windows of their private apartments. These actions are considered unauthorized manifestations, and people get real sentences to serve, like Olga's husband, for example, who just went to a peaceful demonstration. That is, you cannot express your opinion in public, no matter how peaceful and civilized your means of expression is. Journalists are arrested and for and while doing their job. They're hunted by the police before weekends so that they could not watch the weekend protests and write about them. In the beginning, the journalists were only held at the police station for some hours. Then they started getting fines for participation to unauthorized demonstrations. And now they get accused and prosecuted for invented crimes according to the criminal code, with the sentences up to several years of prison. Yesterday, the Belarusian authorities blocked 2 independent mass media websites, while one of the oldest online media, Tut.by, did not have the license renovated 1 week ago. So there is no freedom to inform, nor to be informed. Fear is everywhere. The repressions touched every Belarusian, directly or indirectly. My best friend's man, Olga's man, is in jail. Her boss is in jail too. Several activists of our association had relatives jailed for peaceful demonstration or for no reason at all. My hobby is now writing postcards and letters to political prisoners. I'm sorry.
You can finish normal.
Thank you. I cannot do much for them, but I hope that some warmth and solidarity from Italy will cheer them up. The cherry on the top of this red and green cake is the ban for Belarusians to leave the country that Olga mentioned before. The restriction was announced yesterday night and will become effective on the 21st of December. So the citizens of Belarus become now imprisoned directly in their homeland, which is being transformed by the regime into a concentration camp of 206,000 square kilometers. These things are happening now in the geographical center of Europe. And my feeling is that, I don't know, I'm a bit pessimist today. I don't think there is something tangible that Europe can do right now, something which is feasible and that would bring to concrete results. At the same time, doing something about what's happening in Belarus is no more a question of politics. It's a question of universal human rights and a question of ethics. You cannot just remain neutral in this situation. I would very much like to appeal to European politicians, please do not remain neutral. It's the matter of saving lives. People are tortured and raped with truncheons for no reason. They're put in prison together with homeless people and are not allowed to take shower and in some cases even to sleep. We are at the same level of total lawlessness that Europe faced in the 1930s, with the only difference that mass executions have not been implemented yet. Each time I speak in public about the situation in Belarus, my only request to the audience is, please keep talking about what's going on. This is the only real thing we can do right now. We cannot do much, unfortunately. Information and solidarity is the support that we can give to the protesters right now. As the Association of Belarusians in Italy, we did a lot of things. We started back in July with peaceful demonstrations in support of the people's movement in Belarus. We wanted to attract the authorities' attention to what was happening already then in Belarus. Then, after elections, during the elections, we performed exit poll in 27 countries. Activists from Belarus interviewed the people who came to vote. And I should say that in Rome, Lukashenko had really only 3% of the votes. After that, we started trying to get in contact with politicians, and somewhere we succeeded. But I think as far as Italy is concerned, it's a matter of the state policy. I think that Italy is between two lights, if I can say so, because on the one hand, they need to have a good relationship with Russia, but on the other hand, there is Europe and the United States that they have to look at as well. So in spite of all our efforts and in spite of all the human support that we found among the Italian politicians, I'm afraid that on the political level here in Italy, we cannot obtain brilliant results. So we concentrate our efforts as well very much on the information. We have the accounts of our association in social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter, that we use like the information channels to transmit the news from Belarus every day, almost in real time. This is what we were doing before actually we decided to have our social network. Every one of us used to make posts on our social accounts, but now we just pull everything together, and our Facebook page has almost 1,200 followers, which is not bad, I think, because we started working on it hard only at the end of September. Besides this, we are also engaged in charity actions. And I should say that as the Belarusian state a couple of weeks ago just took the money from the bank accounts of those Belarusians who had received financial aid from the charity foundations, now we started doing individual help to someone we personally know. It's like one-to-one aid. So we hope that we do not attract the authorities' attention and people can actually get the money and use it. We also, of course, write letters and postcards to the political prisoners, and not only when someone of our acquaintances gets imprisoned, like Olga's husband, for example, we write postcards to such people as well. We talk, we communicate between us, we pass information like in a group of people, and the solidarity became more person-to-person kind of thing right now. So that's what we are doing. We are informing and sending our solidarity to the protesters. We manifest our solidarity with the Belarusians and inform the Italian society on what is going on. And I think that this is the most simple thing that everyone can do right now. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Katrina. That was a very emotional testimonial and speech. Very, very emotional. I think everybody feel. Now, after that, it's very difficult, to present something, to present an event like that, because it's too much emotional. It's. I am feeling the emotion of everybody, and it's not easy. Then now, let's go to Lina. Lina, let's speak about Ukraine. Lina, you are first secretary of the National Union of Journalists. I am journalist in Ukraine. Lina, you know.
Yeah, I know, Oliver. Yeah.
Then we were on Maidan. We are fighting for freedom, and our brother from Belarus are so close to us, and they are our brother. They are fighting, and when I hear what say Olga and Katrina, it's remember me Maidan and where we were and what we did. Then Lina, please what's going on in Ukraine.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate for giving me a floor and to express my view. But first of all, I would like to say a few solidarity words with our colleagues in Belarus. Over 100 Ukrainian media outlets and journalists have signed a statement initiated by our journalist union, and we support our colleagues who perform the professional duties in so strong condition and call to stop the violence against journalists and citizens in Belarus. We had this week we invited the vice director of Belsat TV from Poland in Ukraine, and he said about strong conditions and about the violence against journalists in Belarus. You are great, our colleagues, indeed. Yeah. And I would like to say that today we had one survey about the human rights in Ukraine, presented by a non-government organization ZMINA and Democracy Initiatives Foundation. And Ukrainian say that the most value of freedom of human rights is the freedom. It's logically, it's naturally for Ukraine that the freedom is the main value. But Ukrainians say that the state mechanisms for protecting the right are very weak, and the most of people believe that the best way to protect their rights are to apply to journalists or to media. It's nice to see this level of trust, but we have something to work on. And I want to support Veronica, who said that she had no opportunity to protect their rights in Ukraine because of imperfect legislation. And first of all, we need to strengthening state and public institutions for protecting the human rights. And this is typical for Ukrainian. Ukrainians are ready to go to Maidan, as you, Oliver, said, as you remember, to defend their choice. And Ukrainians are ready to collect aid at the front to defend the country. But Ukrainians not believe that a change can be achieved by a state institution via state institution like court, and they are not ready, for example, to go to the police or to the court, and they believe in media and in the journalist power. We have largely progressive legislation for that protect journalists, but at the same time, we have 74 cases of physical attacks against journalists in 11 months in Ukraine. Journalists, like their colleagues all over Europe, may encounter police intimidation and legal harassment, or smear campaigns, or bullying, online bullying, pressure from politicians and editors, and economic pressure on the media owner, from the media owners or sponsors. And journalists also face threats, physical violence. We have many examples from all these treatments in Ukraine.
Yes, I know. And Lina, what do you think? For you, we are talking about the reforms and in Ukraine now, and the situation, economic situation is not very good. What we can have from which support we can have from Europe?
If you is a question of wide view, Ukrainian institutions are weak indeed, so we are interested in greater integration with European institutions and and stronger support from the European Union that will keep Ukrainian government and Ukrainian politics from shaking left or right or back and forward and such other. At the same time, Europe should not approach Ukraine as an issue of Western European states. We want to have more active neighbors, maybe, and the fight against corruption and abuse of power remain leading issues for Europe and for Ukraine too. We see the attention from international institutions are paying to this. Yes, we also disappointed with the lack of progress in the fight against the corruption in Ukraine, but not everything is so clear. We have many examples of investigative journalists who publish brilliant brilliant stories about the abuse of top officials, for example, or politicians. However, we don't see an immediate reaction from authorities, and often we don't see any reaction at all. Okay. Authorities have learned to ignore this investigation contained in journalists' stories, don't apologize, don't refute, but simply ignore. Okay. And another aspect is to be a journalist, investigate journalist or investigate activist, not in Kyiv, but in Ukrainian region. It's another aspect of journalists' work. It's not just about, for example, fire of car of Radio Free Liberty, New Kyiv, for example. More dangerous is the work in the regions. We have the case of Katerina Gandzuk in Kherson, as you know, public activist. We have the case of journalist Vadim Komarov, who died after a brutal beating in Cherkasy 1.5 years ago. Both crimes are still unsolved, and this creates an atmosphere of fear among local journalists and activists. If the murder of journalists hasn't been solved for 1 hour and 1.5 hours, does it mean that the same can be done to any other journalist in this region? This is a question we get from the regional journalists. And local authorities in Ukraine are much less criticized maybe than the central government, not because local authorities work better, but because this criticism can be dangerous. And if you ask how Europe can help to Ukraine, I will say so. We need support of independent media, especially local independent media. Such media create a strong community in the public sector, and this is the control over the government, over the local authorities. Yes, this is guarantee maybe that weak voices will be heard, not just the voice of power.
Merci beaucoup.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lina, for this presentation. Yeah, I know the reality in Ukraine. I have nothing to add. That's a fact. Then now I have to move to Fedor. Yeah. Fedor Klimenko. Okay, Fedor Klimenko, you are the founder of Russian Monitor. we belong to the small club of the Russian opposition, and not small. We are increasing. But yes, Fedor, the situation in Russia, what's going on? We have some hope.
Yes, I have, because I think this current situation in my country reminds me of the USSR in the late Brezhnev period, and as well the Russia in the late Yeltsin period, in the sense that we have an old dictator whose political and physical future is obviously, getting closer to the end. And we seen that the members of Putin's close circles, oligarchs, Siloviki, are trying to ensure the, the process totally, illicit. I think transfer of transfer of power, so-called transit, in Russian, they call this process, that process transit of transit власти. I think this totally, illegal, totally, unconstitutional process, and of course they totally show that they did, a major crime, bypassing this constitutional legal procedure, and anything. And now we think that Putin and his, cronies, his, close circles, hastily looking for a successor, so-called, преемник, the person who can guarantee to, Russian criminal elite, so-called elite, the preservation of power and, and assets, and we have, it's very serious situation, but there is a hope, because now we can see that regime feels vulnerable, and we have this unique situation when this regime in Russia can be changed, but probably this opposition, all people who hope that the next Russian government will be more democratic, more European, and more more sincere, less corrupt. There we need some closer cooperation with the West, with Europe, and to try to push a pressure on this situation. But I'm afraid that right now European Union and the West as a whole are not going to do anything about it, because we see that they perfectly can understand what is happening in Russia, but we see only some rhetoric, but no real actions. And
You think we are at the end of a Putin era?
yes, for sure, but it can be prolonged, and if we will not be able to do something with it.
You mean what? We don't be able to do something?
I think we have really unique situation when probably it can be called a revolutionary situation, because now we have a weak dictator, a regime that feels weak. We have largely woke population in Russia. We have some uprising in Far East, in some other part of the country, and we have the situation that Putin's regime, that not Putin's regime, the regime in Russia is completely despised by the whole other world, and in this situation, I think it's possible to expect that the West, that European Union, will try to do something with it, try to change the regime in the better way, and because I don't think that try to do the business as usual is good idea for the West. I think Russia under this in the hands of this gang, Putin's gang, even without Putin, will stay dangerous. To its neighbors, to be dangerous to the West, and especially given the fact that regime has enormous nuclear potential, and not to mention the moral and ethic aspect of the situation. And I would like to draw attention of the Western public to the fact that in the current process of instability that visibly seen now, the Putin regime could be more sensitive to external pressure, to the sanctions, to the other other approaches that can be help move the situation in the right direction.
Thank you, Fedor. Merci beaucoup, Fedor. Спасибо большое. Then now the time is flying. Then now I have to go to what can Europe do? I have to go and to give the floor to our European, Western European friends. First of all, I will give the floor to the Professor Bill Boring. Bill, no, okay. Then Maria Laura. Okay. Then.
Yes, I am here.
Okay, Maria Laura, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I cannot start the video, but I can. You can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's okay, Maria.
Very good. Yes. What can Europe do? Well, it's interesting to see what Europe has been trying to do, but because on Monday there was a meeting of the foreign ministers in Brussels, and the High Representative Borrell mentioned Belarus, and he supported what the minister said, that they acknowledge the fact that there's continuous repression, as we have heard even too clearly from what Olga and Ekaterina were saying. And there's continuous repression by the authorities in Belarus against the population, and they asked the Lukashenko regime to stop. But they are now finalizing a third package of sanctions, and Borrell said, "I hope it will be adopted quickly." We all hope, but what is the sanction? He says that the sanctions will it is an important agreement. He was quite pleased about this agreement by all the ministers, that in view of the Human Rights Day, which is today, he called it a landmark agreement, the first of its kind, that will allow the European Union to target serious human rights abuses and violations worldwide, not country by country. But then they went to identify the countries. And on Belarus, he said that I am sure that this time there will not be other reasons for delaying the adoption of this package of package against the regime in Belarus. What is incredible to me is the fact that this is what Europe said. not much, I would say. But what is incredible is what is Carnegie Europe did kind of a poll in Belarus, and is on a wide range of people from Belarus, and 70% of them are still optimistic that their protest will succeed in ousting Lukashenko. This is very interesting, very important. 4 months after the election, and 80% of those interviewed said that they were protesting for the first time in their life. So this is so important for the future of Belarus. The thing is that what's happening now is it's very, very painful. The fact that Europe is moving towards this third round of sanctions, well, we hope that they can actually do something, really something to change the regime. But what is interesting is the difference, and this was noted in the European foreign ministers meeting, is that the protest in Belarus has changed, that moved from, has evolved, I would say, from a call to repeat the elections at the beginning to a demand for a comprehensive democratic reforms and democratic values associated with the European Union. So this is the important thing, result of this protest. They wanted new elections, now they want democratic reforms. And so this is to me, I mean, I'm answering your question about Europe. Europe has changed, and the moment that these new sanctions will be implemented by Europe, we hope that something moves. I mean, we cannot say what will happen, but we hope that this something will move. The sanctions will be banning the perpetrators of these human rights crimes. They will be banned from entering the European Union, and their assets will in the European Union will be frozen, and the European people will not be able to make funds available to them. This was launched. This was a proposal launched by the Netherlands in the meeting on Monday, 3 days ago, and we hope that this kind of movement can continue. And Borrell said that we are finalizing this third package, and I hope it will be adopted quickly. I am sure that this time there will not be a delay in adopting these sanctions. The problem is that do people in Belarus accept this, only the sanction? They now, according to this Carnegie Europe survey, they now want something different, and they want, they demand comprehensive democratic reforms. So this is the change from the beginning of the protest, and the protest is moving towards a different scenario now, because now they want democratic values associated with European Union. So this is where we in Europe have to support Belarus. Yes, to protect human rights, but also to support these movements towards democracy. So this is something that we hope that this debate is also will be also this problem will be debated also in these 2 days, today and tomorrow, of the European summit. And we hope that this is not going to be only words, but some concrete action can come out of Europe. We hope so, at least. And this is very important.
Merci. Merci, Maria-Laura. Merci beaucoup. Then Maria-Laura, you are the founding president of the Brussels Press Club. Then you know everything about European policy and.
Yeah, the problem is the freedom of the press. I think Ekaterina was mentioning the problem of the situation of the press, and the journalists cannot work in Belarus, and it's difficult, and they are victimized. There's quite a lot of journalists also in prison, or they had to leave the country, and so this is. We as journalists, we would like to help them, but we don't know how. Probably Katerina was mentioning the fact that they are now giving their help individually. So probably this is something that we should do. We should maybe connect with some of these journalists, and I think also Lina from Ukraine, you are the head of a journalist association. So probably we should help, try to create a kind of network to help these journalists. When I was, in Brussels, I've been trying to help a journalist from Ukraine who had to leave the country because he was victimized by some of the bureaucrats. They actually threatened to kill him, so he left. So he was asking for help, other colleagues in Europe. And we probably, with your association and other associations that in Italy or in other countries in Europe, we should create a kind of, I don't know to call it network, or because it's the freedom of the press is fundamental for this. I mean, there was a speech a few days ago by the Commissioner Jourova, and she was, somebody asked her, what is the meaning of Human Rights Day for you? And she said, for me, it's the personal engagement to contribute to straighten what is still not right in the country, or in the country we live in, or in the country we would like to straighten. And this is, if this country is different from the country we were born in, and this is exactly the case, our case. We from Europe want to help the journalists in Ukraine or in Belarus, and this is some kind of call. We have to. We are doing some work with Ekaterina to spread the information. I'm writing stories on Belarus for Italian media. So this is.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria. The time is flying, and I have to I have to stop you because we need to give the floor to our friend Wolfgang Gressmann from the Project Media Dialogue from Germany. I apologize, Maria, but I have to stop you because this is very interesting. But we don't
Very
have
important, yeah.
yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
very important. Merci beaucoup, Maria Laura. Thank you very much. Wolfgang.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivier. I want to say also some words about the situation. A friend of mine, journalist from Belarus, sent me yesterday, so I think it's impressive too. She wrote, I think the most important thing to say is the criminal prosecution of journalists in Belarus. Criminal proceedings against a dozen journalists for organizing unauthorized meetings, and journalists are just people who fulfill their professional duties. The regime says you organize the demonstrations, and this is a thing you can put to prison. And she keeps on. Some of them were forced to leave for other countries and become refugees. We heard it. Some are in prison. This is absurd. And of course, now in Belarus, a journalist who does not work for the state media is an object of persecution by the special services. Impossible to work every time you risk your health and freedom. This is a real hunt. This is a situation, I think, which shows different dimensions. First dimensions was discussed. This is concrete solidarity in the moment for the people who fight and for the journalists work. Then repressions, we need to develop also repressions on the regime, but first we have to do our best that the protests and the fight for democracy in Belarus is still on our agenda, in our news, even under Corona times, and that our task is to show what happens and to also to discuss perspectives. That also means, from my opinion, to think about possibilities for Den Haag to make clear that in another time, this Belarus criminals in this regime will take to the court of Den Haag because of the thing they did against human rights. And we have, I think Olga said it, it's necessary, I think, also to have a view on the economic relations between European Union and Belarus, where we can make real sanctions which are hurting this criminal clique regime at Minsk. And so I think in a longer term, they have no chance, but Europe has to show solidarity, and we have to make steps to show our support for the people, for the demonstrators, and for the journalists in Belarus, because we need them for reporting from their country and to report to make reports for us about the situation in the country.
Yeah.
So I think it's a main task at the moment to keep Belarus situation on the agenda and prepare for a democratic future and not forget the things happening now.
Merci beaucoup, Wolfgang. Now, I think I have to give the floor to Roger. Roger, what's going on with the question on Facebook? Roger, microphone.
Thank you, Olivier. We do have quite a few people putting questions. Hannah asks, do Olga and Ekaterina think that one of the reasons that Lukashenko is closing the borders is he doesn't want people to come out of Belarus and show the kinds of injuries that are physical injuries that have been inflicted on them? Could that be also part of the reason? And should companies, I think there's a Norwegian company that does a lot of business with oil products from oil and so on. What should they be doing? Should they be taking action now? Should we be putting pressure on companies that are trading with Belarus? That's a question. There's also a question about Crimea. and the United Nations resolution that was passed 2 days ago calling for Russia to withdraw from Crimea. What, if any, would be the reaction to that? And then again, more questions about the Magnitsky measures, which are coming into play today, which we've heard quite a lot about, how effective they are likely to be, particularly in relation to Ukraine. So a question for Belarus, a question for Russia about Russia, and a question about Ukraine. Back to you, Olivier.
Yeah, then what? Okay, for the comment on Ukraine, Lina, what is your comment with this Crimea?
Yeah. Thank you for this strong support of Ukrainian territory and Crimea, people in Crimea and people on the occupied territories. We are welcome the introduction of new European sanction against the authorities, so-called authorities of occupied territories. But the question is how Ukraine will use this opportunity because of poorly documentation, human rights violations on the occupied territories, including Crimea. This, as you know, we have no international monitors in Crimea, and the documentation is hard to fix these violations, and we have no Ukrainian journalists or independent journalists on these territories, and the only way to get the right information is to use the civil journalists, bloggers, Crimean Tatar journalists, and we have a lack of instrument to fix any violations. But publication in the media and in the social network can also be sources of such information. Yeah, I agree.
And before asking a question to Fedor about the Magnitsky list, I want also to add a question to Veronica about Veronica, I am also in the Russian opposition, and I want to know white ribbon in Russia. Do you have an office in Russia? What's going on with your organization in Russia? What you will do for? I know what you did and what you are doing for Ukraine, but for Russia, for Belarus, what is the project?
So in general, white ribbon is not present in Russia. There was an initiative. I cannot now recall the city exactly. So it's more like towards east. So maybe it was Vladivostok, or just it was not Moscow or St. Petersburg. So there was like a white ribbon event. But white ribbon has nothing to do with opposition or being not related to opposition or not opposition. So white ribbon in general is a civic society movement. So once there is the initial group that can engage men and boys advocating against domestic violence towards women, then the white ribbon comes in. So that's why I said that we're here to help. And the reason why we opened white ribbon in Ukraine, because there was a group of people, initial group, who were able to take on responsibility on leading white ribbon campaign in Ukraine. And the initial group was from Poland, actually. So they started the white ribbon in Poland first and in Eastern European region, and then we brought it to Ukraine. So I know that in Russia there is a pretty active women rights activist, Alona Popova. I know there is a member of parliament, Oksana Pushkina. She is a journalist. She's a famous journalist herself. So she's the one advocating in the Duma, in Gosduma, in Russian parliament, for domestic violence victims. So that all information I have about Russia, except the fact that the decriminalization of domestic violence already happened, and it's at some point it should be overruled by current government or by next government, but it should eventually happen. It's something that is out of scope of that cannot happen in 21st century. So the basic legislation should be there. So we are open for communication, and we do not have any representation in Russia and in Belarus as well.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Fedor, you only have 2 minutes because I want to give the final words to Olga. Fedor, then Magnitsky list. What do you think about? We need a new one. Microphone, 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 microphone.
I'm sorry. I think we need the maximum severe Magnitsky Act towards, Russian authority, towards, Russian oligarchs, Russian siloviki, because I think only, the pressure from the West can, divert some prominent figure of Putin's circles from Putin, and this split in this Russian, elite can be very helpful for regime change in Russia. And I think this, severe sanctions against the regime representatives very important, very important.
Merci, Fedor. But you are still optimistic for the next year.
Yes, I'm optimistic in this sense that the next year we will have, the bigger, the major. We can see the major upheaval in Russia, but I am not sure of the results of it. I think this the Putin regime is going to be, going to be the same oppression, oppressive way as Belarusian regime in Minsk do, and I think they analyzing this situation and see that the more violence you put, the more results you get, and I think they are quite preparing for this situation.
Yeah,
and without any serious pressure from the West, I think they can win this war.
No, but we know that no transition in Russia without blood. This is the Russian.
Yes, of course, and yes, of course, and they ready.
They are ready. Yeah. Olga, I want to give to you the 2 minutes. I want to give to you the final words, Olga.
Well, thank you for that. I want to thank all of you for this communication. It's very important. It's been always important to feel support from other people, other countries, to feel that people understand what you are going through. The same happened when I was participating in this civic forum on the 2nd and 3rd of December. And I found out that there are people like in Slovenia that are doing the same, something similar to what we do. They're trying to protest in a different creative ways because police do not allow them to gather in big companies for some protest against government, etc. So it was good to know that people, that not only we in Belarus are trying to struggle against something in this peaceful assembly way, let's say so, but people around the world are doing the same. And what's going on now here is with this border closing by the government. I think it's like Putin cover on a kettle that heavily boils. You know, people are getting so angry that maybe it's even good to the protest to some extent. You know, people will stand up even more for their rights. So I think what we do is important. I hope that Europe will not stand aside and watch until it resolves itself, because we should remember that back into history, like in 16th century, right here in Belarus, this country, the Great Duchy of Lithuania, was the first one to publish stated the so-called like constitution of the world of Europe in 1588, and all the legal acts and legal things were assembled in this statute. It was called. I don't know how to. So and we should not be left aside. We should be part of Europe. And as Maria Laura said, that the agenda changed. It doesn't change. We still want new elections, and this will be our first step towards democratic society. As soon as our voices will be heard, we will go forward and we will move to European values and democratic society.
Merci, Olga. Thank you very much, Olga, for this nice testimonial, for your final words. And now I have only 2 minutes to congratulate everybody, to say thank you, merci beaucoup, spasiba, dziękuję, to everybody. That was a very amazing event, and we will have new event for the next year. I want to say to you, have a nice holidays, and I hope that you will come back for our next event, and because we will have. And